I'm Dina Proto, and I'm an out boss.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to episode number 44 of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. On today's show, I'm thrilled to have Dina Proto joining us in Las Vegas, Nevada. We are still recording live at the NGLCC's 2017 conference, and we have someone who calls Las Vegas her home. So very excited to have you on the show, Dina. Are you ready to inspire fellow out bosses?
I sure am, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you for agreeing to be on the show. So just a little bit about Dina. She is a registered nurse, author, and speaker, and she offers compelling insight into the health issues of those within the LGBT community. So I'm really excited to talk about that.
Sure.
And Dina's spirited approach motivates engagement to foster change by creating compassionate awareness of the healthcare inequalities faced by those in the LGBT community, how they're created, and how to overcome them. And when Dina isn't busy with her business, she's really focused on supporting other business owners affiliated with the Las Vegas LGBT Chamber of Commerce. So I couldn't think of a better person at this conference to be interviewing. So getting some of your insights about the conference and also your business is going to be really helpful for those of us just thinking about getting started. So to kick us off, tell us a little bit more about your business and what makes it unique.
It's very interesting. Sometimes we intentionally go to school and we become whatever we think our profession is going to be. And then there are many of us that are entrepreneurs that happen to find something that sparks this fire inside of us and makes us feel compelled to do something different, right? Yeah. And it might be education-based, but it might not be. What makes Dina Proto different as an author and a speaker is that what I've been able to do is take my education as a nurse, my experience as an entrepreneur, and my identity as an out lesbian business owner to really look at what are the health inequalities that are faced by the LGBTQ space, exactly how they developed and why, and how we as people within that space and our allies and people who are maybe unwitting allies can help us to change that trajectory for not only ourselves, but the people that come after us.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's knowing what your superpowers are. So you looked at your education, you looked at your past experience. You've been in the healthcare field for a little over 2 decades, right? So 25 years?
Well, yeah. So more than 25 years in healthcare itself, almost 20 years as a nurse.
Yeah, that's huge. And just finding where some of those gaps are, like every good entrepreneur does, seeing a business opportunity, but also because you're a purpose-driven entrepreneur, that it immediately gets back to your own community, right? And I think that's huge. And there seems to be, you talked about allies, there's a great awareness now around still the social injustices that so many of us within LGBT communities face, especially those most marginalized. And there's a lot of room to run right now in healthcare, especially like trying to leverage those allies. So I'm curious, right now in your business, what has you most lit up and most inspired to wake up every day and do your best work?
It's interesting. I tell my friends, my fellow entrepreneurs, and my coworkers that on occasion I work what I call princess shifts at the hospital. So I still practice critical care nursing. And, whether it's a patient, a family, or my coworkers, I find that every single day in my nursing profession, I continue to come out. And I come out for a plethora of reasons. Sometimes it's to help a patient who I know is dealing with a particular diagnosis and they share a mutual identity as someone within the LGBTQ space. Sometimes they're a family member and it just happens to come in conversation and it's a teaching moment where I can help them to understand about their loved one, their family member, or their friend. And then most interesting to me is that I find a lot of my coworkers that are nurses and physicians and other ancillary services within that healthcare space, realizing that they don't understand who we are, what makes us unique, and what our needs are. And, in the healthcare industry, the median average number of hours for a physician, say, currently to be trained is 5 hours in their whole residency and education on the LGBT space. Whereas for a nurse, it's maybe a median of 2.5 hours across the country.
Wow.
And that is probably enough to only know that our demographic exists, but not enough to understand how they can help us. And I think that people within healthcare have a genuine desire to really affect positive change and to help people. And so their desire is to not be a barrier, and yet they're not provided the educational means and tools to help them to take care of us.
Yeah, yeah.
So they feel ill-equipped.
There's so many amazing things that you just said. And what I find really, really helpful is just your willingness to have those one-on-one conversations, your willingness to be out. You know, sometimes I imagine when it's not so easy, especially when you're trying to do the learning moments and redirecting people if they're not so skillful with their language. So thank you for doing that. And also what I found surprising is just the 2 hours of kind of professional development training that's available. So again, you know, in your business, you're seeing this huge need. Obviously, as awareness is being raised, especially for those most vulnerable within LGBT communities, I'm sure a lot of people just knowing what you do, knowing who you are and your family probably seek you out often. So
very often.
It's smart that you're like, there's a business opportunity here and I'm going to, right. So,
exactly
so take note, if you're thinking about starting your own business, just find those gaps, because I think that's super smart. Just kind of on that note, thinking about that moment, you know, you're still providing critical care nursing and you have this business, right? So the moment that you decided to start the business and probably reducing your hours and doing whatever else you were doing before in the healthcare field, usually when I'm interviewing people, they arrive at that business idea and just kind of going in full force and committing for one of two reasons. And the first is that they had this desire, they wanted to put a dent in the universe, like, you know, Steve Jobs. They had a purpose, they had a drive. And the other piece is that they no longer wanted to work for someone else. They no longer wanted to conform to a culture that didn't value who they were. You know, they were covering some aspects of who they were. Naturally, I'm sure you can identify with a little bit of both of those, but
sure.
I'm curious, like, which one resonates the most with you and why?
So when I look at this latest endeavor for myself, I take a step back and I look at my history as an entrepreneur and how I became a certified LGBT business enterprise and why I believe so much in what we do for our community. As a registered nurse, both myself and my wife opened a greeting card company several years ago. And we did that because there was a need for communication.
Yeah.
Right? And we know that a lot of us within the LGBTQ space, we have a desire to help our families to understand our authentic selves. And sometimes we don't know how to convey that. And many times they want to validate our authentic selves and they don't know how to communicate that either. Right? So we thought that by opening the greeting card company, we could help people to do that. And so we spent quite a long time, blood, sweat, and tears driving that passion. And we had some successes and some failures. That process, though, led us and led me personally to this space because I thought, being purpose-driven, that I would create a marketing tool or educational piece to retailers to say, you know what, I know you think that there are only 9 million of us, but 87% of the rest of the society has a family friend or coworker who is us.
Totally.
Right? So we're not as small a community as you might want to think. And there are many of us that have not really owned our own identities yet either. Right? So nurses should never do any research because you get down this terribly nasty rabbit hole and you emerge with more statistics and more information that forces you to look at things from a deeper perspective, which is what happened. So now we have a second entity, identity. And what has emerged from that is an ability to use my education as a nurse, my years of care and education to the community as a hospice nurse, and providing insight into death and dying and grieving and loss. And so I've been able to marry those pieces of my identity and my education to help people to where this is. So, that's helping people to own who they are, to understand how they came to be who they are, regardless of whether you're LGBTQ or an ally. And on many levels, beginning to look at your own biases that you have, whether you realize it or not. Even those of us within the space, and community that we live in have our own biases. And it's challenging to be mindful about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then you can use that to either help people or not help people intentionally.
Yeah. Yeah. I like your response to that question. And it seems like you are 100% purpose driven. And what I think is really helpful, especially for our listeners, is where you started as an entrepreneur isn't necessarily where you thought you would be maybe 5 or 10 years since starting the greeting card company. And yet you're able to test and change, and you're seeing a huge opportunity that better aligns with all of your superpowers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I thank you for doing that, especially in the hospice world. As someone who's trans, that's one of my biggest fears is working when I'm older, is this making sure that if I'm ever in a situation where I do need a hospice care worker, that they're going to get who I am, they're going to respect that, and they're going to make sure that I have the kind of care that I need, that's specific to being trans. So thank you for making that kind of change, because it's needed all across the country, if not the world, right? So I'd like to shift a bit and talk more specifically about your identity and what brings you to the Rainbow family, and specifically kind of digging into some of the challenges that pop up with being LGBT and a business owner. And I'm curious, this is another question that I ask all of my guests, is if you can think of a time where, like a really specific situation where, you had mentioned coming out, right, in the workplace again and again, because it's not a static piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as a business owner in the work that you're doing, recognizing that nurses in particular only get 2 hours of professional development training, as you're kind of pitching to different hospitals or healthcare settings, do you ever worry that because you're focused on LGBT communities, that might impact your bottom line or your revenue stream, or that you may even be unsafe in certain situations by revealing certain aspects of yourself? Have you ever been in a situation like that?
No, and I don't care.
Okay. Yeah. Can you talk more about the not caring piece? Because I think that's a big fear for our guests, for some of our guests, of I have this business idea, I want to be out, or I'm not sure if I can be out, or how out can I be in business? So I think hearing a little bit about why you don't care might be helpful for people.
I think that one of the challenges for us as human beings, right, not just within the Rainbow community, but as a human being, knowing who you are and that you're a valuable person in and of yourself is something that is difficult to come by. And I'm sure you can talk to probably a multitude of people and hear childhood stories about feelings of invalidation, feelings of abandonment or not having attachment with certain people, feelings of inferiority or shame or guilt. And what caused that to happen in each of our lives, regardless of our LGBTQ identity or not, could be very different. The impact that it leaves on our lives is the same. And, when I look at our stages of development as human beings, and I look at my own life, I look at things that happened to me as a child. My parents tried to be the best parents they could be with the tools that they had. And I don't believe that parents create children intentionally to not be good parents, right? I mean, you do the best that you can do. So when that happens, at some point, we process through our stages of development and we have to begin to own our own lives. And we can have a lot of hurt and a lot of anger for what's happened, abuse, neglect, invalidation, whatever it is for each of us. You can carry that all of your life, or you can figure out what to do with it and put it in a better place and make that moment in time where that aha moment happens for you be that moment of clarity and moving forward and that moment of health.
Yeah.
And I think that for myself, I think it's a process, and it might be a process for everybody. I'm not sure. But I think that I probably didn't realize it until later in life. And I think probably the things that I felt made me insecure and inferior are other people's things. Yeah. And I don't have to own them.
Yeah.
And from the time that I started validating myself and who I am and realizing that I'm a good, solid, healthy, caring, and compassionate person, and that I can live my authentic truth, then their stuff stops being my stuff.
Yeah.
And their identity and whatever they've projected onto me becomes theirs and not mine.
Yeah, I think that's nicely put. And I've had a few guests on here before talking about the coming out process for them, internally sharing that with other people, and initially sharing it with other people, being more influenced by the reception, especially if it's a rejecting response. And then over time, as people become more comfortable in their identities and their skin, recognizing I am who I am, and other people's reaction, as I'm authentically myself, that's their own stuff. So I think that you've just kind of underscored similar perspective of other people who've been on the show.
Sure, you can have identity foreclosure, and and many of us come out of the closet, test the water, go back in the closet, come out of the closet, check, is it okay? Say, nope, I'm going back in.
Yeah.
Or we come out to selective people because they're our safe space.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important for those of us that are public figures and have an ability to communicate that greater message. I think it's important that we own that. And that we set the tone so that doesn't continue to happen to future generations. Yeah. And the only way that happens is by education.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the safety is a huge factor. And if you are safe and you have job security, or especially if you're your own boss, holding that space for other people, being publicly out, and recognizing that we all have to do this. Even though I have this podcast and I'm out as bisexual and transgender, if someone doesn't listen to this episode and I don't mention it on another one, they may assume things about myself. So
sure.
One of the other questions that I like to ask, because it's not always kind of like the things that make it hard to be an out boss, but the things that make us great, right? So the whole theme of the conference that we're at for the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, their annual conference, the theme this year is Thrive. And I see a lot of parallels between our lived experiences of being LGBT, coming out. That whole process is very unique. Some of those lived experiences, for me, I see help me be a better boss, right? And so I'm curious for you, what are some of those parallels that you see from your own experiences and how they relate to running your own business?
So I think that one of the things I learned early on was the importance of inclusion. And if I want to be included in things as somebody that's out, then I need to be inclusive with the people that I hire and the people that I connect with and do business with. So I definitely look at inclusivity, not just within the LGBT space, but within every diverse group that I can connect with. So the nurse in me knows that we all bleed the same color. Yeah. It doesn't matter. And in nursing, we learn that we have to be non-judgmental. And that is probably one of the most difficult things for people to do, because we base our judgments and our mindsets of other people off of how we feel like we've been judged, right? And so it needs to be an intentional act every single day and every single moment that you have with people. What judgment am I bringing to the table and why? I think that I continue to do that in my own business. What am I looking for? Why am I connecting? And making sure that I, as infrequently as possible, because we are all human and we have things that are ingrained in us, behaviors that are ingrained in us that we've been taught. So I'm constantly unteaching those behaviors in myself and making sure that I'm mindful of that with other people. Yeah.
I think that's huge. And I think that self-awareness comes with the process of being truly self-actualized. And I think that's kind of one of the, I think for our communities, like the LGBT communities, that's one of our superpowers for sure. For many of us, not all of us, but yeah.
Well, I think that it's, life is a journey, right? And so, and some of us are at different chapters in our book.
Yes, I like that. Yeah.
So I think that we're all going to get there at some point.
Right.
When we get there and how we get there is very different. But I think that self-actualization is something that we all strive for, and it's a basic human need.
Absolutely. So before we go to our sponsorship break, I have one more question for you, and it's really considering some of the challenges of being out as a business owner and many of the strengths. What would you want our listeners to really hone in on as they think about how they can be more authentic in their own work?
I think I would say you need to hone in on your personal feelings, not necessarily knowing what your feelings are, because we all have personal belief systems, but understanding where they come from.
Mm-hmm.
And taking that a step further and understanding what the impact that can have on other people.
Yeah.
Because we impact people whether we intend to or not.
Every day.
Mm-hmm.
Every day. And so really having that self checking in and knowing where you're at. And sometimes it's just a feeling in your body, right? And you can name that. And then kind of that self-awareness of understanding, even in an interview like this, we're impacting each other, hopefully positively, but that's happening, and sometimes out of your control. So I think that's really, really helpful. And whether you're kind of in a 9-to-5 still, or if you're running your own business, those are really good qualities of a leader. It's just kind of the self-awareness, and then that kind of room check of where other people are at. And it's going to make you really effective at what you do. So we're going to go to a really, really quick sponsorship break. But for our listeners, please don't go anywhere, because when we return, we're going to get to learn a little bit more about Dina, her business, and how to stay in touch with her after today's conversations.
HR and diversity professionals. Are you struggling with engaging LGBTQ talent? Do you stay awake at night worrying about limiting litigation risks? Have you considered seeking support around these concerns, but just aren't sure where to turn? Look no further. Rhodes Perry Consulting offers you solutions with the Engaging LGBTQ Talent A to Z certification. This proven 4-week mentorship program delivers skills, offers support, and connects you with other professionals committed to transforming themselves and their workplaces. Learn more about this cutting-edge program by visiting rhodesperry.com and use the promo code RPC for a 10% discount. Take action and visit rhodesperry.com.
Welcome back, Outbosses. We are now going into our bonus round, where we'll have the chance to get to know Dina a little bit better, gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work, and then learn one way to stay in touch with Dina after today's conversation. So, Dina, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
I am ready. Let's do this.
I love it. Okay. So, in one sentence, what does it mean to bring your whole self to work?
I think it means living your truth.
Yeah.
Just living your truth and be proud of who you are.
Yeah. Pride. And yeah, definitely. I love that. And what's one personal habit that helps you master yourself and your business?
I take a lot of notes.
I love it. As one fellow note taker to another, note taker pride.
But I'm not tech savvy, so
yeah.
So I take a lot of old school notes.
Yeah, there's something about like a really good pen and a good journal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. So name one thing that you readily delegate in your business to stay focused on what you're good at.
Tech.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't do tech.
No. So like social media stuff, websites.
Oh, that causes me chest pain.
All of it. It's like agita.
Yeah, it is definite agita.
Yes, I get that. I get that. Okay, because so many people have asked me this question, I'm not going to punt it your way.
Great, thanks.
Yes. Maybe I have a career in politics. I don't know.
Oh, no.
So considering the current presidential administration, what's your take in terms of the health of LGBT businesses? Do you view the current president, number 45 as I call him, as someone who is harmful to LGBT businesses, or someone who is helping galvanize our communities to work more closely together?
I think galvanizing.
Yes. Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I think that I value immensely the benefits that we've had in the last several years and the gains that we've been able to make.
Totally.
I also believe that we have a new generation of leadership within our space.
Yeah.
And I think that it's time to take it to the next level, and I feel like we can do that.
Yeah.
And I think that we can do that together, and that's banding together, and we know a piece now that we didn't know before, which was the impact that we have as a community,
yeah.
Right? And it's beyond the social impact,
right?
Yeah. So we have a knowledge that we didn't have before, and knowledge is power.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. I think, like you said, from 2008 until, last November, we saw what was possible, not only within our own communities and our own power, but working with leadership in government and corporate America, et cetera, that really stepped up as allies in big ways. And for many of us, it's as communities, we're not going back. We're not going to go back in the closet, or at least not without a fight. Right. And so
there is no identity foreclosure here.
Yes, exactly. I love that. I think we just named the episode right there. So before we go, 2 quick questions for you. Can you share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of outbosses to take that first entrepreneurial leap?
It's freedom. It is a freedom that you have never known.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what your level of income or financial security is. There is just this phenomenal peace in having freedom to be who you are.
Yeah.
You get one life. And so you need to be who you are. You can't take other people's stuff on. And sometimes having a boss who is supportive is great, but sometimes being your own boss and when you can be supportive of others, that's even better.
Yeah.
That's a phenomenal freedom.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think for some people who listen to the show, it's hard to see the other side of the fear. It feels like a ledge. Not everybody's wired to be their own boss, but for those who feel it inside and just can't get past that mindset, listen to Dina's response again and again, because it is totally true. And you may not have all the answers, but just trust your heart, trust where you're going, because it is amazing.
Oh, well, you'll make mistakes as a business owner.
Totally.
No doubt.
Do it every day.
And if you're not making mistakes, that's not real.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So be authentic, be real, know that you make mistakes. We all do.
Right.
And anybody who tells you they don't make mistakes is lying.
Yes, through their teeth.
Yes.
Through their teeth. Right. I love that. So Dina, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
I love this. It was a great conversation. Before we part, can you share with our audience one way to stay in touch with you and your business?
Absolutely. You can check me out at www.dinaproto.com.
Awesome. And I will include that in the show notes along with a couple of other really amazing things about who you are and your book and your speaking. So really a pleasure to have you on the show.
So yeah, I'm excited. So we're supposed to come out on National Coming Out Day.
Oh yeah? For the book or
for the book?
Okay. All right. So National Coming Out Day, October 11th. Okay. So mark that on your calendars. And so I'll include all the promo stuff for that. So
thank you.
Yeah. So for Outbosses, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. It is always my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses like Dina. As a next step, check out the show notes for highlights from today's conversation. Subscribe to the podcast and consider leaving a rating and review in iTunes. And for now, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.